It was the late 1980s, and one Maldivian man was hungry for power whose ambitions would threaten the nation itself. His name? Himveru Hajarage Abdullah Lutfi, and he wanted nothing else than the presidency of the Maldives. Abdullah Lutfi wasn't alone. At his side were 6 Maldivians and a group of strangers from across the sea. The People's Liberation Organization of Tamil Eelam, or in short, PLOT, a terrorist organization from Sri Lanka, stood by Lutfi. Lutfi's villain arc began in 1986. He was caught smuggling turtle shells. During that arrest, he met Corporal Abdullah Shahid, a man whose name would soon resurface in darker times. After his release, Lutfi left for Sri Lanka. That was where his ambitions took shape. In a small cafe in Bamblapitiya, he met a Tamil man named Rudla, and through him, Lutfi was introduced to Vasanthi, also known as Janu, the commander-in-chief of PLOT. In February 1987, PLOT's leader Uma Maheshwaran met Lutfi himself. Uma Maheshwaran had one problem that was stopping him from making PLOT the militant group of his liking. His men lacked weapons. Lutfi had a solution to Uma Maheshwaran's problem because, remember, Lutfi was known to be good at smuggling. 2 men with very different ambitions met across a table. One wanted guns, the other a country. A deal was made. Uma Maheshwaran would help Lutfi seize power in the Maldives. In return, Lutfi would grant him 3 things: a camp base in the Maldives, a safe route to smuggle weapons, and a resort to fund their cause. Lutfi agreed without hesitation. Soon, maps of Mali were being drawn in back rooms. Corporal Muhammad Shahid assisted in sketching the army headquarters. A retired officer, Karo Abbas, joined in to spill the insider details about how the system ran. Their first strike was planned for July 26, 1988, the Maldivian Independence Day, but fate intervened, and the boat they needed to travel on never arrived. During this time, Lutfi had shared his plans with a Maldivian in Sri Lanka, Abdul Majid Khalid. He later returned to Mali in late June 1988 and informed the government of a possible attack. For weeks, soldiers trained and were watchful and ready to protect. But when night came, vigilance faded. Calm before the storm, perhaps. In early 1988, Sagar Nasir met Lutfi and Uma Maheshwaran in Sri Lanka. At that point, Uma Maheshwaran was living in Lutfi's house in disguise, posed as a Malaysian named Muhammad. Sagar Nasir thought he was getting a job as a boat engineer, but instead he was led to a PLOT training camp. There, Surrounded by rifles and militants, he chose to stay. Sagir Nasser, who had been present during the planning and the training, later said in interviews that he was not told about the coup attempt itself. He believed he was being trained for the job he had applied for, not for a terrorist mission. Preparations for the coup began nearly 4 months before the planned date of 2nd November. Float spies Babu and Vasanti arrived in Male. They were assisted by local allies loyal to Abdullah Lutfi. Their role was to gather and relay sensitive, on-the-ground information needed for the operation to succeed. Then came the call on October 14, 1988. Sikh Ahmad Ismail Manik told Lutfi that the president would be flying to India at the end of the month. So, on October 29th, Float's leaders gathered for one final meeting. 80 fighters were divided into 4 strike teams. Silva Shankar's team would storm the army headquarters. Sivam's team would attack the army headquarters from the Islamic Center. Vasanti's team would attack the army headquarters from where the police headquarters stands today. Selva Kaji's team would hunt the ministers. Another unit was assigned a separate task: to procure a ship from France, a vessel that would be used to transport the people and the required weaponry to Male. But the plan was disrupted. The ship was seized by French authorities due to unpaid insurance. With the schedule already fixed and no time to modify the plan, the group was forced to hijack 2 Sri Lankan fishing trawlers instead. That night, under the cover of darkness, they left Sri Lanka, heading to the Maldives on a 5-day voyage. Seasickness, hunger, and fear rode with them, and the sea did not cooperate. The trawlers were intended to arrive on November 2nd, but rough seas and severe storms delayed their journey. Many of the float members became severely seasick, a factor that would later affect their performance during the coup itself. The vessels finally arrived in Male at midnight on the 3rd of November, 1 day behind schedule. Another delay followed. There was no available docking space. Trawler 1 docked at the presidential jetty at around 4 a.m. Trawler 2 docked near what is now the commercial harbour at approximately 4:30 a.m. By then, the situation had changed a bit. The float operatives who had been stationed in Male, those who were supposed to assist the incoming teams, had withdrawn, assuming the operation had failed due to the missed deadline. This left the arriving militants without coordinated support, forcing last-minute and unfavorable changes to the operational plan. The communication equipment aboard Trawler 1 was accidentally dropped into the sea, cutting all communication between the two groups and their commanders in Sri Lanka. The coup began not with strategy, but with an accident. One single gunshot echoes. One militant of Team 1, led by Vasanti, while moving towards the Republic Square, slipped, lost his footing, and his gun went off. A single shot cracked through the dawn. The echo rolled through the sleeping city. The gunshot woke Male, but almost all of the public assumed it was the Maldivian soldiers practicing for the Grand Republic Day celebrations. Vasanti's men then moved east along Burtagur Fanumagu, opening fire on the army headquarters. During the first wave of retaliation by the Maldivian soldiers, Vasanti, the mission instructor and the primary authority figure among the militants, was killed. His death not only broke morale but also removed the central leadership of the operation. Without him, the remaining militants lacked direction and stated objectives. Their actions were reduced to holding back soldiers inside Bandarakoshi barracks, preventing them from reinforcing defense outside. Maldivian soldiers mounted a defense. Corporal Hussein Adam, stationed at the main gate of the army headquarters, continued to resist despite limited weaponry. His stand bought valuable time to the defense force to regroup and counterattack. Though eventually he was overpowered, his actions really inspired continued resistance. Meanwhile, the second group, which had docked later, moved towards the radio and telecommunication center, but they found the facility was closed and its steel doors were strong enough to withstand the explosive charges used against them. Another unit was advancing to capture President Maumoon. Now, they were unaware that the group led by Babu, tasked with seizing the radio and telecommunication center, had failed. Lutfi and his team went searching for the defense minister Ilyas Ibrahim. Sagar Nasir led an attack on Thineh, the president's home. President Maumoon was still inside back then. But remember, Babu's team failed to do what they were supposed to do. So that failure meant that the president's security detail was alerted. Bullets tore through the walls of Thineh, but President Maumoon fled through back streets with his wife Nasrina and their 8-year-old son Ghassan Maumoon, current-day defense minister. President Maumoon was safely evacuated from his residence, and the defense minister also went into hiding. President Maumoon initially believed that the radio station was under the attackers, but around 7 a.m. by chance he discovered that the communication lines were still open. He immediately contacted India, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Sri Lanka requesting intervention. By mid-morning, Maldivian soldiers regrouped. Major Musa Ali Jalil led 11 men in a counterattack, losing 2 soldiers but identifying enemy positions. Musa Jalil played a key role in leading the defense of Bandarakoshi. He sustained an injury to his leg while countering attacks at the northeast corner of Bandarakoshi, where the fighting was most intense. Despite his injury, he continued fighting. 19 souls, including soldiers and civilians, would not survive that morning. Among them, the youngest, Jawad, who whispered to a man beside him. He had whispered with fear trembling in his voice that he wanted to be kept close. Moments later, Jawad's life was ended by a stray bullet. Hostages were taken. 15 Maldivian used as human shields between Ghazi building and the president's office. Others were dragged to Jumhuri Maidan. By midday, the plan had begun to collapse. The rebels, they were hungry and scattered. They were furious, so they turned on Lutfi after the deaths of their leaders Vasanti and Julie. It was shouted that nothing had happened as promised. Even the map had been wrong. With Vasanti dead, the surviving militants had no escape plan, no instructions for retreat in the event of failure. By this stage, retreat was impossible. The plot members lacked coordination, numerical advantage, and the element of surprise. The initial strategy had collapsed and combat became disorganized with minimal situational awareness. In response, the militants initiated an emergency plan. One group moved to hijack a ship from the harbor, another took hostages. They hijacked the vessel Progress Light, and the crew agreed to transport the militants back to Sri Lanka. hostages were forced aboard, including Minister Ahmad Mujtaba and Ismail Nasir. Within hours, Indian paratroopers were airborne. At 9:30 p.m., the first Indian Air Force plane landed in Hurle. At 12:10 a.m., 4th of November 1988, Progress Light departed. While Progress Light was trying to leave Male, it passed near the airport, maneuvering towards international waters. As the Progress Light turned in that direction, Indian soldiers believed it was preparing for another attack and opened fire. Though no casualties occurred, the ship continued onward. Shots were fired and the ship fled into the darkness. The militants brought a hostage onto the deck and threatened to execute the hostage if the warship approached. The Indian warship withdrew but continued to follow. Meanwhile, in Male, at 7:40 a.m., November 4th, President Maumoon's voice came over the radio, declaring victory.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rajya Galobet Rayitunev. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Iyya divhi Rajya Kurimatvi Rakatri Bagawatun Divhi Qawma Rayitun Salame Kurevi Kamataka Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ge hadrata hamda shukrukuna.
On November 5th, the INS Godavari tracked the Progress Light. When it drew close, Lutfi shouted warnings to stay 5 miles away or he would kill the hostages. The militants then killed one of the hostages by stabbing and another was blindfolded, shot and thrown overboard. On November 6th, as Progress Light attempted to enter Sri Lankan waters, the Indian warship issued orders to halt. The vessel did not comply. The warship then opened fire, causing severe damage, and Progress Light began to sink. Both the militant abductors and the surviving hostages were taken aboard the Indian warship. The rebels were forced to surrender. 4 hostages were lost in that final fight. By November 8, the survivors, Maldivians and float alike, were brought back to Male. Some were wounded and sent to India for treatment. A year later, President Maumoon commuted the death sentences to life imprisonment announced on September 17, 1989, over national radio. The rebellion ended. Decades after the events of November 3, 1988, the story of the coup attempt continues to evolve. Lutfi, the man who led the failed coup, completed his sentence and was released on the 27th of November 2023. Lutfi did not serve his sentence continuously though. With only 4 years left, he fled to India for medical treatment, living in hiding for 9 years before eventually surrendering at the Maldives embassy in Sri Lanka in 2019. Sagir Nasir and the rest of the people involved in the planning of the attack completed their sentence and they were released, with Sagir Nasir being the last person to be released in 2014. When we look back at what happened back then, I feel like maybe we shouldn't only remember the night of the attack, but also what it revealed about us as a nation. I feel like the entire attack really tested the strength of our people and the resilience of our military. Despite every limitation, they stood their ground. With courage and open arms, they defended the country. I feel like we are able to stand here today, free and independent, is only because they had the guts to go out there and fight for us. Back then, resources were so limited, but their spirit was not. And I would also like to note that beyond the soldiers were the quiet heroes, the neighbors, the shopkeepers, and the bystanders who carried the wounded through the streets, refusing to let fear or confusion, to say the least, win. Their bravery deserves to be remembered. their stories. It deserved to be told and preserved. This was my attempt at doing that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's quite long compared to the rest of the episodes of the series, but I hope you enjoyed it. Until we're able to unfold another tale beyond the sunny side, this is me, Thineh, signing off. Stay safe and bye-bye.